Two helpless German shepherd puppies, left tied to a tree in the middle of a frozen forest. No food, no shelter, no escape. And as night fell, the wolves came. No one thought they'd survive. No one was coming for them. But what happened next will not only break your heart, it will show you the raw strength of survival, the depth of brotherhood, and the courage that only the most abandoned souls ever find. Before we begin, please subscribe, give this video a thumbs up, and turn on notifications, because you're about to hear a story that proves sometimes the coldest places bring out the warmest hearts. The snow was already falling when the man parked his pickup on the dirt trail that wound deep into the northern forests of Navarra, Spain. The sun was dipping behind the trees, staining the horizon orange and blue. The man stepped out, leaving the engine running. In the back of the truck, two small German shepherd puppies huddled together inside a metal crate. They were barely 3 months old, thin, shivering. Their eyes held no defiance, only confusion and fear. The man didn't speak to them. He didn't even look at them. He pulled the crate out, opened the door, and dragged the puppies by the scruff toward a thick tree trunk just off the path. He tied a short rope around the smaller one's neck and looped it around the other. The leash was tight. There would be no escape, no food, no blanket, not even a goodbye. Then he left. The sound of the engine faded into the wind. The forest swallowed the silence. The pups, one male, one female, whimpered softly. The larger of the two, who would one day be called Bruno, placed his body over his sister's. She would come to be known as Neva, for the snow that clung to her fur that night and nearly stole her breath away. They didn't understand why the man had brought them here, why he'd stopped giving them food 2 days ago, why their mother had been taken away and never returned. But they understood this. It was cold, and it was getting colder. They couldn't run. The rope kept them against the base of the tree. Their tiny bodies left trembling imprints in the snow. Night crept in fast, bringing wind, darkness, and sounds. The rustle of branches, the snapping of twigs, eyes. Far off, watching. At first, it was one set of glowing yellow eyes, then 2, then 4. Wolves. Hunger drove them close. One approached the edge of the clearing, ears perked, breath visible in the freezing air. Bruno stood, legs trembling, teeth bared in a pathetic growl. He stepped in front of Neva, who cowered behind him. The wolf stepped closer. Then, a sound cut through the trees. Distant, rough, human. A voice. Then light. The beam of a flashlight sweeping across the snow. The wolves scattered. Moments later, boots crunched through the frost. A man appeared, older, maybe in his 50s, beard frosted with ice. He froze when he saw them, 2 tiny shapes shivering against the tree, rope digging into their necks. Dios mío! He rushed forward, pulling a pocket knife from his coat. Neva let out a soft cry as the rope was cut. Bruno collapsed into the snow, too cold to run, too weak to bark. The man knelt beside them, hands gentle, voice shaking. It's okay. I've got you now. He wrapped them in his thick flannel coat and pressed them against his chest. He didn't know where they'd come from, but something told him he wasn't leaving this forest alone, not tonight, not. The old man's name was Rafael Ortega. He lived alone in a cabin half a kilometer from where he'd found the puppies, tucked deep in the forest near the border of the Pyrenees. It was a place no one came unless they were lost or hiding. Raphael wasn't exactly either. He just didn't like the world anymore. He hadn't spoken to his son in 4 years. His wife had passed 6 winters ago. Since then, he found peace only in the quiet of pine trees and the rhythm of chopping wood. That night, though, something disrupted the silence. A sound he hadn't heard in years. Whimpering. Raphael had gone out looking for fallen branches when he saw the wolves first, eyes gleaming between the trees. He didn't understand why they backed away until he saw what they were circling. 2 shivering creatures tied to a tree like discarded trash. Now, back in his cabin, Raphael laid them gently beside the fireplace, wrapped in an old woolen blanket. The fire crackled. Steam rose from the puppy's fur as the snow melted off them. He filled a small bowl with goat's milk and placed it nearby. The male pup, stronger, licked at it weakly. The female just lay there, eyes half closed. "You're fighters," Raphael whispered, stroking behind the male's ear. "You didn't give up." He hadn't held a living thing in years. Not like this. That night, he kept waking up to check on them. The snow outside thickened into a blizzard, but inside the cabin, the fire burned steady. In the early hours of morning, Neva stirred. She crawled closer to her brother, placed her head under his chin, and for the first time since the rope had been cut, she slept without shaking. Raphael watched them, chest tight. He wasn't sure what it was about those 2 that had cracked something open in him. Maybe it was how they leaned on each other. Maybe it was the fact that they had been so close to death, and yet still reached for life. Or maybe it was the silence. They hadn't barked once, just like his house, after his wife died. The next day, Raphael made a decision. He climbed down the mountain, walking for 2 hours into the nearest village with a note in his pocket. Found 2 pups, starving. Will keep them until claimed. No reward needed. He didn't leave his name. He didn't expect a reply. What he didn't know was that someone had already started looking for them. Not the man who left them behind, but someone who had once loved the mother who never came back. And soon, Raphael's quiet world would be shaken once more. By the 3rd day, the snow had stopped. Raphael stood by the window with a mug of steaming coffee, watching the treetops drip in the weak sunlight. Behind him, near the fireplace, Bruno and Nieva lay curled together on an old rug. The swelling in their paws had gone down. They still trembled when the wind howled through the cracks in the cabin walls, but less than before. They had stopped flinching when he entered the room. Bruno even wagged his tail that morning when Raphael put a bowl of warm porridge in front of him. "You've got fight in you," Raphael muttered, scratching behind the pup's ear. "Good." But something had been bothering him. That morning, as he cleaned out the blanket they'd been wrapped in the night he found them, he discovered something lodged in the folds. A small piece of leather, a collar, torn, burned on one edge, the metal tag barely hanging on. Raphael squinted. The name was still visible, carved into the metal. Luna. It hit him like a punch. Luna. He remembered that name. 3 months ago, a neighbor in the next village had lost her dog, a beautiful German shepherd. She'd put up signs, called the shelters, even came to Raphael's cabin once, her face pale, voice shaking. He told her he hadn't seen anything. He hadn't lied. Not then. Her name was Marta, widowed, lived with her teenage daughter Clara. She had raised Luna from a puppy, and Luna must have been the mother. He sat down slowly, the collar turning in his hands, a tightness forming in his throat. He should have taken the collar to Marta immediately, but something inside him resisted. He didn't want to let go. Not yet. The puppies were getting stronger. They followed him now, stumbling over each other as he moved around the cabin. They cried when he stepped outside and barked softly for the first time when a fox appeared near the window at dusk. They trusted him, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel like a ghost in his own home. But the past doesn't disappear. It lingers in collars, in burned leather, in names etched into tags. That night, Raphael stood over the fireplace, holding the collar in his hand. He could throw it in, burn the last trace of the life they'd come from. Or he placed it gently on the mantel. He wasn't ready to decide, but someone else was already moving closer. Marta had seen the notice in the village store. No name, no reward. But she knew. She knew in her bones. And she was going to find out the truth, even if it meant going back to the place where she'd already lost too much. It was just after sunrise when Raphael heard the crunch of footsteps outside. Not the soft pad of paws or the scurrying of woodland animals. This was steady, human, careful, coming closer. He moved to the door quietly, peeking through the frosted glass. A woman stood at the edge of the clearing, breathing heavily, snow clinging to her boots. She looked older than he remembered, but the lines on her face didn't hide her urgency. Marta. She hadn't seen him yet. Her eyes scanned the tree line, then drifted toward the chimney smoke rising from his cabin. She took one step forward. Behind Raphael, the puppies stirred. Bruno let out a sleepy bark. Nieva padded toward the door, her ears perking up. She was stronger now, curious, brave. She sat beside Raphael, head tilted, as if sensing the moment. He opened the door. The cold hit them both at once. Marta looked up and froze. She didn't speak right away. Her breath came out in clouds. "I saw your note," she said finally. Raphael nodded. "They're inside," he said quietly. She stepped forward, slowly, hesitantly. When she crossed the threshold and saw them, curled together on the rug, eyes wide with alertness, her hands flew to her mouth. "They look just like her," she whispered. "Like Luna." Raphael motioned toward the collar on the mantel. "It was in the blanket. I didn't know until 2 days ago." Marta picked it up carefully, fingers shaking. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. "She was taken," she said. "Someone broke the gate. I think they stole her, and bred her. For money." Raphael didn't respond. His hands were clenched behind his back. "I searched everywhere, even here. You said you hadn't seen anything." "I hadn't." She looked at him, not angry, just tired. "I believe you." They both turned toward the pups. Bruno sat beside the fire, watching them with quiet caution. Nieva had crept toward Marta, sniffing the air. Then, gently, the little one licked Marta's hand. A sob escaped her lips. "They're hers," she whispered. "I can feel it." Raphael stepped back, letting her sink to her knees. She scooped Neva into her arms. Bruno followed, placing his head on Marta's lap. It was as if something ancestral had clicked into place. Raphael felt a heaviness in his chest. this was right, but it hurt like hell. Later, over tea, Marta said the words he'd been dreading. "I want to take them home." He nodded slowly. "They're yours," he said. But when he said it, something cracked. The silence that had filled his cabin was no longer peaceful. It was about to return, hollow and cold. "I'll come back in 2 days," she added softly. "Let you say goodbye." Raphael said nothing. But that night, when the puppies crawled into his bed and nestled into his chest, he didn't sleep. Because sometimes the hardest thing is knowing the right choice, and doing it anyway. Raphael spent the next 2 days in silence. He didn't talk to the puppies, didn't chop wood, didn't walk into town. He just sat by the fire, watching the flames flicker over the walls that, for a brief moment, had felt like home again. Bruno and Nieve sensed it. They no longer climbed into his lap. They sat near him instead, alert, patient, as if waiting for permission to come closer, as if they too were bracing for loss. On the morning Marta was meant to return, a snowstorm began to roll in. Thick, sharp winds howled through the forest, the kind that closed roads and buried entire cars in minutes. By noon, the sky was nearly white, and Marta hadn't come. Raphael stood by the door for hours, eyes scanning the path through the trees. Nothing. No boots, no car, just wind and snow. Worry crept in, then panic. He dressed in layers, packed a thermos of hot tea, and loaded Bruno and Nieve into an old sled he hadn't used in years. They barked softly, confused but trusting. He wrapped them tightly and pulled the sled into the storm, guiding it along the only route that led toward the village. Visibility was almost zero. Branches cracked overhead. The wind whipped his beard and burned his eyes. He trudged forward anyway, boots sinking into snow with every step. It took nearly 3 hours to reach the edge of the village, and what he saw made his stomach drop. Marta's car was stuck in a ditch, half covered in snow. The windshield cracked. No sign of movement. He ran. She was inside, slumped over the steering wheel, shaking from cold but conscious. A bleeding gash on her forehead told him what happened. She'd slid off the road and hit a tree. Raphael pried the door open and pulled her out, wrapping her in the blanket meant for the pups. She clung to him, dazed. "I had to come," she whispered. "I know," he said, voice breaking. "But not like this." He carried her back to the cabin in the sled, one hand holding hers, the other guiding them through the wind. Bruno and Nieve curled around her body, their warmth pressing against her sides. That night, as the fire roared back to life in Raphael's cabin, Marta lay on his couch, wrapped in wool and silence. The puppies didn't leave her side. Raphael sat nearby, staring at the flames. She opened her eyes. "I don't want to take them," she said quietly. He looked at her. "They belong with you. I see it." "They belong with us," she corrected. He blinked, unsure he heard her right. "You saved them. You gave them back a life. And maybe you gave me something back too." Raphael didn't know what to say. For the first time in years, someone had reached into the fire of his solitude, and not pulled away. Bruno barked once, as if approving. The snow kept falling, but inside something was thawing at last. The storm passed by morning. Sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the snow-blanketed forest. Inside the cabin, it was warm. Bruno and Nieve played near the door, chasing a pine cone Raphael had rolled across the floor. Marta sat at the table sipping tea, a bandage above her eyebrow. Raphael watched from the kitchen, quietly grateful. It had been years since his home had felt like this. alive, full of sound, breath, and the gentle chaos of others. But peace never comes without interruption. That afternoon, Marta's phone rang. She stepped outside to answer, pacing in the snow. When she came back in, her face was pale. "That was the shelter," she said, her voice low. Raphael froze. "They've been tracking the man who took Luna, the one who likely bred her." He looked at her sharply. "They found him? They're close. But they also think these puppies might be considered evidence." The room went cold again, not from temperature, but memory. "They want them returned to the municipal facility," she continued, "until the investigation is over." "No," Raphael said instantly. "They won't survive that. They've just started to live." "I told them that. I told them they're safe here, that they've bonded. They don't care. But I do." Silence fell between them. Raphael sat slowly, his fingers curling into fists. Bruno and Nieva watched from the rug, heads tilted, ears alert. "I'm not giving them up again," he said. "I won't." Marta sat beside him. "Then we fight." They spent the next 3 days gathering documents, photos, health reports, vet notes, statements. Marta reached out to a lawyer in the city, a woman who'd once worked in animal welfare. She agreed to help. Pro bono. Raphael wrote a letter by hand. "These dogs were discarded, left to freeze, and tied to die. They survived not because of luck, but because they were loved back to life. Taking them now would be a second cruelty, one they don't deserve." They sent it all. And then they waited. Days passed. The cabin felt quieter again, not from sadness, but from the weight of uncertainty. One night, while Bruno slept with his head on Raphael's boot and Nieva curled in Marta's lap, the call came. Marta answered on speaker. "We received your documents," the lawyer said, "and we presented everything. The court ruled this evening. The dogs will remain with you, under shared custody, permanently." Raphael didn't speak. He just placed a hand on Bruno's head and whispered something only the dog heard. Marta wiped her eyes and laughed through tears. "We did it," Bruno barked. Nieva ran in circles, tail wagging. The fire cracked. The wind outside had softened, and somewhere deep inside Raphael's chest, that silence he'd lived with for years, it was finally gone. Spring came slowly to the forest. The snow began to melt, revealing soft earth and green shoots beneath. Birds returned to the trees. Streams flowed again. And Raphael's cabin, once buried in silence, was now full of motion, warmth, and life. Bruno had grown into a powerful young shepherd, broad-shouldered, alert, with eyes that tracked every movement like a guardian of the woods. Nieva, slightly smaller but quicker, had a habit of nudging Raphael's leg with her nose every time he stopped moving for too long, as if to say, "Don't drift away again." They had found a rhythm. Marta visited often, sometimes with her daughter Clara, who had quickly fallen in love with Nieva. Other times, she stayed for days, bringing food, books, stories, and slowly, without ever forcing it, company. And Raphael, to his own quiet amazement, welcomed it. One Sunday afternoon, as Marta and Clara played fetch with the dogs near the clearing, Raphael stood by the doorway, arms crossed, the wind brushing through his silver hair. He watched Bruno run in circles around Clara, barking joyfully, and Nieva leaping over logs with fearless speed. Marta stepped beside him. "You still think you don't have room for people?" she asked, smiling. Raphael exhaled through his nose, then gave a small smirk. People, no. These ones? Maybe. Marta laughed. That's good. Because Clara made you something. She held out a small handmade plaque, crafted from bark and carved carefully with a dull kitchen knife. It read, Bruno and Neva's cabin, where love found us again. Raphael swallowed hard. He didn't speak, just took it with both hands, nodding slowly. Later that evening, they hung the plaque by the front door. It was simple, but it meant something deeper than any of them could explain. Bruno slept that night by the hearth, his chest rising in deep, contented breaths. Neva curled in Clara's arms, both of them fast asleep on the rug. Marta leaned her head on Raphael's shoulder as they sat in silence. Not the old silence, the new kind. The kind that held peace, belonging, healing. Raphael thought back to the first night. The tree, the rope, the eyes in the darkness, and how these two creatures, thrown away, left to freeze, had somehow thawed everything inside him that he thought was long dead. They hadn't just survived. They had saved him. In the morning, the sun rose over the forest, lighting the plaque above the door. And Raphael stepped outside with his coffee, Bruno at his side, Neva trailing close behind, ready to walk into a life he never thought he'd want again, but now knew he could never live without. If this story moved you, if you believe in second chances, and if you know that love can be found in the most frozen places, subscribe to the channel, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with someone who still believes in kindness. Because sometimes it's not the ones who find us that save us. It's the ones we never saw coming